We got a bidet!
Hey everybody, and welcome back for another video in today's, or I should say this week's, Shoot the Sheev podcast. We are talking about Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. We're talking about the movie, mostly about the film, probably mention a couple of things in general here and there as well that surround the film. But essentially we're here to talk about, our thoughts on the film in general, some of the things we disliked, some of the things we liked, and then just anything else we want to mention about it to cap it off. So, I think just to kind of get the thought process going, I want to start with what was the time like for Revenge of the Sith? What was happening, in our world? Where were we? Do you remember when this movie was coming out? Do you remember anything about what was going on, or if you saw any advertising, stuff like that?
I don't remember when it came out necessarily, but I do remember the first time I saw this film, or at least some of it.
I think it came out in '05.
I would have been 9 years old. Um, Again, I think I've said this before. We weren't a family that really went to the movies, hardly ever, maybe once a year, if that. Um, I don't remember seeing this movie in theaters for sure.
Okay, so I'll probably cover most of this part then. So when Revenge of the Sith was coming out, I picked up little bits and pieces along the way as a kid. I don't remember how old I was. Trying to think. I think I was maybe in I do remember. Because I had a friend that introduced me to comic books, and this was actually the first comic book that I ever bought was the Revenge of the Sith comics. I was in seventh grade at the time. And there was a junior novelization that came out, all that good stuff as well. So it's interesting. Well, also, one more thing came out actually before the movie came out, and that was the video game, which we have played on this channel, and you can check that out as well. But there were so many things that came out before the actual movie that as a kid, I kind of already knew what was going to happen in the movie before I saw the movie. So it was interesting to have that kind of a dynamic before seeing it. I remember renting the video game from Hollywood Video, which is no longer a thing. But it came out like maybe 4 or 5 days before the film. So it was like released early in the week compared to the movie. And my mom helped me go to Hollywood Video and I checked it out. And I had been a big fan of the Lord of the Rings games, being the Two Towers and the Return of the King. Not so much the Fellowship, because that one was way different. But this new Star Wars game was essentially those games, like the mechanics. So I absolutely loved the Revenge of the Sith game because I had already had a love for the system of the Lord of the Rings games. So I was very excited once I started, getting into playing the game. But there's some really interesting things that if you're not aware or you haven't played the video game, let alone read the book or listened to, some behind the scenes stuff, the game was actually made before the movie. Like they had to know what the script was before anybody else did, like anybody as far as the public. And the reason why is because they wanted the game to release alongside the movie, which means they had to make the movie before the movie comes out. So what that means is that they essentially got the director's cut of the film, and then they made a video game based off of what they were given to work on. And so what's cool about it is if you play the video game, you essentially get the director's cut of the film, which in my opinion was super neat. As a kid, I was thrown off because I didn't understand those types of things. Like I wasn't able to put one and two together of why they were different. But like I'd play the video game, and then when I saw the movie, I was like, where is half the stuff that I played in the video game? Why is this so different? And it took, until I became an adult and I did my own interest of research and whatnot, where it all came together. And I realized, oh, you know, they had the director's cut, and then a lot of the stuff was cut out of the film due to, pacing and length of the film. Supposedly, there's like a 4-hour cut somewhere that was never released.
Is this the one that you've told me before about where they changed someone's lightsaber color?
No. Um, there, so where that's coming from, and we'll cover that really quick, is that in the original episode 1 video game, Mace Windu had a blue lightsaber, but then when episode 2 came out, Sam Jackson got a choice of his color and he asked to be using purple. So that's where that change happened. Um, but some interesting things that we got from the game that's not in the movie. One, when Anakin and Obi-Wan are going to save the Chancellor, they actually go through kind of like the sewage system of the ship that they're on, the Grievous's battleship, whatever you want to call it. And that's completely taken out of the film. There is a deleted scene that shows this, which was kind of cool. So if you go in and you watch deleted scenes, you can actually see what was going on there, but it is not in the final cut of the film. Let's see what other cool things. Um, there was a Grievous lightsaber battle. There was a Mace Windu lightsaber battle with Anakin, which again, very different from the film. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. And what else? They did like an alternate ending, which was kind of cool. So you got to see, if Anakin had made the jump over Obi-Wan, what would have happened? If he would have been able to jump over and kill Obi-Wan and then kick him down the hill on Mustafar, what would that have looked like? And it actually kind of played off of what Anakin was telling Padme when she was trying to desperately, bring him back from the dark side, saying, we can just, move on from this. We can do our own thing. And Anakin's like, no, I can be the one that's in charge. I can overthrow the Emperor, which this extended cut or alternate ending, I should say, actually showed that when the Emperor presented Anakin with his new lightsaber, that he used it to kill the Emperor and then took the galaxy for himself. So really cool things that we got to see from the video game, where if you're not a gamer or you just really aren't into movie licensed video games, you would have never known that stuff. So I really, really encourage you guys to check that one out. It had a lot of fun lightsaber gameplay, in my opinion, way more realistic than anything for its time, which had the competitor of the Jedi Knight games, which are said to be some of the best lightsaber combats. But in my opinion, this was the best. But yeah, so that was the video game. There were technically 2 different versions of the game. There was the console version and the handheld version. As far as the mechanics, the handheld kind of matched the console, but the handheld was more or less a side scroller, which in my opinion, I think we could use a new Star Wars side scroller game nowadays. I enjoyed those back in the day, and I think they're kind of a lost art. So, yeah, I kind of hope those come back. Let's see. I know there's not much for Sarah to talk about in this section, just because I had way more exposure to the stuff. I do remember still the day that I saw the film. One of my buddies, his stepdad he had an extra ticket to go see the film, and usually my dad and I kind of like waited an extra week or two to go see the movie as opposed to seeing it the weekend of, just because crowds are crazy. But he had a ticket to go the second day that it came out, and so I actually went with them and saw the movie. And it was a huge theater, a bunch of people there, a lot of us just enjoying, the conclusion of the prequel movie. And I will talk a little bit more about that experience when we get to the tough love portion of this, just because when we were on our way home, us kids were in the back seat, and then I got to listen to the 2 adults that were, taking us to the movies, and listening to the couple of things that they were talking about really started to uh, jar some thoughts about the film, which were really cool. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Merchandising. So we talked about merchandising for the other two prequel films. Once again, I feel like it wasn't quite, it definitely wasn't the same as episode one. It wasn't as in your face as those times were. Attack of the Clones dialed it down quite a bit from episode one's marketing. I think Revenge of the Sith was similar to Attack of the Clones. One of the things that I remember vividly that Revenge of the Sith merchandise had was that they were having Target exclusives that people were going nuts for. There was a special Darth Vader figure. We actually have a copy of it. But unfortunately, the buyer that we bought it from had a damaged box, and some of the stickers were ripped off, and we weren't aware. So maybe we'll check that out on the channel someday and actually unbox it. Who knows? Um, just because I'd rather have a proper one in the case. I think they also had a Grievous that was special that came out. One thing that the Revenge of the Sith merchandising did that I believe the others did not is that there was kind of like a free set of figures that came out early. They actually said it right on the box that they were the early editions of their figures. It wasn't like first editions, quote unquote, like they were their own set. So you could buy figures that really gave no context to who they were. Like there was a General Grievous figure, and it was basically like, haven't seen a trailer. There's this dude, he looks pretty cool. What's he gonna be like in the film? Then you just kind of had this mystery. And then I think when the film came out, that's when things started rolling out as far as like the major merchandising products. My first figure was Darth Vader. I remember that with my mom bringing home my first Star Wars Revenge of the Sith figure. But yeah, so that's kind of like what was going on as far as, what was my experience as a kid. And so what we're going to do here is we are going to roll into the tough love section here momentarily, and stick around, and we'll see you in a couple seconds here after the little advertisement. So stick around. Have you ever wondered what Amazon coffins are and what they're full of? Well, we got you covered here on the channel. Check out our playlist of our Amazon coffin unboxings, where Sarah and I open up boxes that have Amazon returns, and we share with all of you what we get in each of those boxes. If you ever wanted to get into liquidation and want to know what types of things you can find, check us out. Now back to our show. Welcome back. We are here to now talk about our tough love section for Revenge of the Sith. No Star Wars movie is perfect. Personally, I enjoyed this one quite a bit, but there are some things that even myself are a little bit critical about this movie. One thing in particular, just to kind of get us going, one thing that I disliked about this film was that I felt like, especially once I heard there's a 4-hour version of this film, I feel like there was different things about the film that I wish they would have expanded on. Kind of like the Battle of Kashyyyk. I really wanted a lot more of that. That was kind of what I was referencing with when I said I was in the back seat listening to the adults. That was one thing they said, and I hadn't really thought of that as a kid. Like, you know what? That's right. Why couldn't we have gotten more of the Battle of Kashyyyk? Which is interesting because I think Battlefront 2, the original one, came out before this movie. And there's a very, very expansive, maybe that's the word, version of the Battle of Kashyyyk, and it was really cool. Like there's like this big wall that the Wookiees tried to use to keep out the enemy, and then if you're playing as the enemy, you can go behind enemy lines and make that wall come down so that the separatists can flood in, and it would have been crazy to see something like that. But I do know that the main focus of the film is what's going on with Anakin and Obi-Wan. But something like that, where it's like, we've seen it almost done better ourselves because we are creating that battle. And I would have loved to seen, what would have happened on film. Um, Unfortunately, we never really got to see something like that. Um, but yeah, that's one of my criticisms is that there's different aspects of the film where I wish we'd have gotten more, but I know we can't because they have to trim it down a little bit. Another one, what's that?
I was gonna say it is a pretty long movie, but the Battle of Kashyyyk would have been pretty cool, and I could definitely see where, from that point of view, if they kind of glazed over it instead of really showing what was going on.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna hold on to what I was gonna say next. So, what's one that you got?
So I'm gonna start with my first memory of the prequels, which for me, I don't really remember seeing any of the prequels prior to meeting Jeremy, with the exception of one movie and really kind of specifically one scene. And it was from this movie, and it's the battle between Emperor Palpatine and Yoda when they're in the Senate Council, if you will. And the parts that I remember from back then is seeing Yoda, he's walking around with his cane, so he's very elderly, can't really even walk by himself. But yet somehow we see him doing all these cool acrobatic flips, and he's practically flying from one Senate chamber, if you will, to another, going back and forth, and just going all over the place, crazy like a pinball in a pinball machine. And it seemed so fake. I couldn't get past the unrealism of it. It didn't seem believable to me. And, with my previous experience being the original trilogy, it's a lot more practical effects and not a whole lot of CGI, or really any CGI at that point in time, because that wasn't really a thing. Uh, so just to see the crazy difference between what I was used to and what Star Wars meant to me to be seeing this and how different it was, it really kind of drove me nuts. It set me on a wrong path with the prequels. It made me not want to watch the prequels because it just seemed so um I don't want to just keep saying fake over and over, but it when the story is hard to believe because the characters are moving in ways that don't seem realistic, it makes it hard to want to pay attention.
Not my Star Wars.
Not my Star Wars. Yes, you're right. Um, so that's kind of my biggest critique for it. Having, you know, watched this as an adult and, having seen the entire prequel trilogy all the way through, it's still a scene that bothers me. It still doesn't seem very realistic. But I've seen a lot more film just in general, not just Star Wars, but just in general, since that first time that I saw this, and have become a lot more accustomed to the way the CGI looks, and, kind of that what do they call it? The suspense of disbelief, where you kind of just let things be the way that they are, even though they're not necessarily true. Um,
Suspension of disbelief.
Suspension of disbelief.
Mm.
Um, yes, thank you. So just kind of taking it for what it is and being able to enjoy the movie without being overly critical on the laws of physics and things like that. Because otherwise, anything magical or Star Wars wouldn't really exist. Um, so still not one of my favorite things, but I'm more accepting of it than I was back then.
Okay. Um, yeah. Which I still remember when we were, first dating and talking about these things. I remember that conversation, and now you've seen them all. So people can change. People can change. Um, One of the things that I wanted to bring up, was that with me playing the video game first and having an idea of what should be happening, it's one thing I think to, play the video game and then expect the movie to be exactly like it. And then when it turns out that it's not, to be kind of upset. Um, because what I had thought when this was going on was that maybe the game developers just wanted to spice things up a little bit. Like maybe they were told, this is the way that the Mace Windu thing is supposed to go down. This is the way the Grievous fight is supposed to go down. And maybe the game developers were like, we kind of want to spice it up a little bit and put more lightsaber fights in there and, uh, make it more fun, so to speak, and not just uh, basically making the Grievous thing a cutscene, in a way. However, it has come out that there are things kind of like that. The specific one that I want to mention is when Obi-Wan first drops down from the ceiling on Utapau, he says his famous "Hello there's" quote to Grievous. The bodyguards turn around with Grievous and turn on their electrostaffs. And in the film, Kenobi just drops like a vent on them and then slices the one that tries to get away from the vent. Whereas in the video game, there was actually a fight between Kenobi and I think the 2 or 3 bodyguards that were there. That was actually supposed to be in the film, but because of time constraints, they made the adjustment. So like that legitimately was supposed to be in the film, and it's something that you want to see, but because of the idea of runtime and pacing and stuff, George felt that it was better to cut that and do it the way that's in the film. So there's different things that I think were really cool that were left on the cutting room floor, if you will. One of them being, this isn't confirmed necessarily, but there is a lot of implications that it was supposed to be this way, was the Anakin versus Mace Windu fight. I think that would have been amazing to see on film. In episode 1, we see this small tension between Mace and Anakin as a child, like Mace having this disapproval of him right away. And then in episode 2, it kind of seems to follow suit. And, in episode 3, right before all this stuff goes down with the Emperor, Mace undercuts Anakin like one more time and then says, if what you told me is true, then you have gained my trust. So he's like literally telling Anakin, I don't like you, but if what you're telling me is true about this big threat, well, then I will finally respect you. And I feel like with him kind of spitting in Anakin's face that way, it would have been epic to see Anakin go back there and take him out, as opposed to the way it did happen. So I feel like that's a lightsaber fight I really wish would have been in there, because I think a lot of fans would have loved to seen, this dynamic between Anakin and Mace Windu, and maybe we could have gotten some sort of like first glimpse of dark side abilities from Anakin during this fight. That would have been amazing in my opinion. But again, they have to make cuts. They have to, hit a certain runtime, and that one probably just didn't make it. So stuff like that, the stuff that I was expecting to be in there and it's not, and there's proof that some of that stuff was supposed to be in there, makes you wonder, was some of this other stuff supposed to be in there, and how cool could it have been to see that? But another thing that I got, and I actually heard about this recently, was that the whole high ground scene was, there was a different version of what was going to happen for when Anakin finally is taken out by Obi-Wan Kenobi in Revenge of the Sith. And the high ground thing really wasn't a thing until supposedly Hayden Christensen had this issue with walking up steep hills. Like he kept falling. And so this whole high ground thing was like a joke. And then George decided to make the high ground a big thing in the film. And the alternative version was supposed to be that Obi-Wan was supposed to do some sort of defensive move, not offensive, but defensive move, where he was trying to like get Anakin away, and somehow in the mix of spinning his lightsaber was supposed to accidentally chop him, which I think that would have been a little bit more of the Jedi way to make it an accident as opposed to him just full on trying to chop up what once used to be his best friend. But
I do feel like that was still a defensive move, though. Anakin was coming at him to kill him.
it was defensive, but I don't know. I feel like it was more offensive in a way. Like it's the Jedi thing. So prime example, when Mace Windu was having he had his lightsaber in the face of Palpatine, and he's saying, it's better to just basically kill him as opposed to put him on trial. And Anakin is like pleading, "Hey, you can't do this. He has to be put on trial. It's not the Jedi way to just kill him." And so, you know, I feel like it would have been more Jedi-like to try to convince him in some sort of way, as opposed to chopping off his limbs and leaving him for dead, kind of a thing. Because he thought that Anakin would have died on there. We see that in the Kenobi show. When he hears that Reva tells him that Vader is still alive, he's like, "Oh my God, he survived," kind of a thing. So I think his intentions was to kill in a way, but who knows?
I'm not doubting that. But at some point, you're kind of out of options, and it's not like he could just put him in handcuffs, you know? It's a very high tense situation.
Yeah.
To jump into a couple of things that I am going to be a little nitpicky about. One of them is going to be Emperor Palpatine's voice and some of the sayings that he has, I don't remember one of them, but I know there were two of them that I was thinking of. One of them I can't remember right now, but one of them was when he goes, "No, no, no," and he's just like, "What? Come on, like stop being so whiny." It doesn't even sound like him. It just doesn't sound right. I feel like it was really bad acting. Um, I feel like the scene could have been done a lot better. It was that line and then whatever the line was right before it, I believe. But it's just a very awkward scene in my eyes.
It was kind of weird. I'll be honest about that one.
The other one I'm going to mention is, when he announces Order 66, and this is not on him, this is something else. He announces Order 66, and they're going through a montage of kind of the different Jedi that we know or may have seen before and how they're being killed and stuff. And we see a Twi'lek, and I don't know her name, so if you do, you can let me know. But we see a Twi'lek, and she's got some clone troopers behind her, and she's on some sort of weird, like bright and colorful, like rainbow colorful rainforest planet.
Felucia, and her name is Ayla Secura.
I don't recognize that planet at all. And it would have been really cool to see a lot more of it.
Yeah. Uh, During that montage, most of those planets were not shown before. Even the one with Coyote Mundi, the guy with the big long head, um, that was a new planet that we haven't seen before. But again, if you and I know lots of Star Wars fans hate to hear this, but if you do some things that are outside of the film, like play Battlefront 2 that released alongside the film, uh, that planet is explored more, and so is Felucia. That's actually where the Acklys are from, the like hissing four-legged thing that was trying to kill Obi-Wan in the arena.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, to say that we haven't seen all those places is fine, but a lot of those places looked familiar enough. I didn't care that they were new because I'm like, okay, this doesn't look like anything interesting. It's just like for that one guy you were mentioning, he's just on some big long platform. Like, okay, who cares? I've seen it a million times. But with a planet like that, to throw something that's that different and that intriguing and colorful and bright and makes you curious as to where it is, to only have it be on screen for what, 60 seconds? I'm like, come on, I want to see more.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. Um,
So those are a couple of my more nitpicky, smaller things.
one more nitpick that I have before we start heading towards the positive things is there was a commercial that absolutely nailed Vader's entrance in when he's in the suit, and I was hoping that was going to be in the film, and it wasn't. It was probably one of the most disappointing things I had ever experienced coming from commercial going into a film. And it was the shot was it was pure black, and um it's the back and forth, I think, with Vader and Palpatine, and Palpatine, says the word rise in his like croakly whatever or froggy type voice, and you get Vader rising on the table like it's like you see him rising and the music's blaring, and it was really exciting, and it wasn't nearly as exciting in the film as it was in the commercial. So that's my last little nitpick, is that I thought that would have been awesome, but they were two completely different scenes. um, he said the lines when Anakin first became Darth Vader in the Chancellor or in the Emperor's office, and then obviously the Vader table scene was much, much later, almost the end of the film.
Drives me nuts when the commercials don't match what's in the film. Don't tease
Yeah.
me like that.
If I'm able to dig it up, I might insert it here.
Lord Vader.
Yes, Master.
Rise.
But if not, that's why it's not in here. If it's, not around anymore. Uh, but that is our tough love section. So stick around, and we are gonna be doing our positives for the film coming up. So stick around. Have you seen The Mandalorian? Do you wonder what Operation Cinder was that they mentioned in this show? Well, we got you covered, because we have an entire playlist dedicated to the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign, which highlights Operation Cinder. So if you check out our playlist, you'll be able to see what actually happened with Operation Cinder and know what they're talking about with the show. Now back to ours. All right, we are back with our positive section on the film, which is probably, our favorite part of it all. Just to kick it off, one of the best and probably the best sword fighting sequences in all of cinema is in this film. And honestly, aside from the whole high ground thing, I think it was probably my favorite out of any film that I've ever seen, and probably won't be able to be dethroned just because it's so awesome. Everybody was waiting to see, these two brothers go at it, and I think George and his crew nailed it. There's even a couple of things that didn't make it into that fight, which would have been interesting. But the way that they did make it, I think, was just fine. Just a small little trivia tidbit. They had entertained the thought of what happens when two ends of a lightsaber, try to smash into each other, and what kind of like explosion would happen. They did end up cutting that idea, but it would have been neat to see, because I don't think that question has been answered since.
Not
But
that I've seen.
that's my first one that I want to roll out. So what's one that you like, Sarah?
I absolutely love that four-legged lizard thing that Obi-Wan rides around on.
Let's see
The
if we can find the name.
the noise that thing makes is just it's fun, it's annoying, but I like it. It's just one of those things of like I haven't heard something like that before, and I'm not going to do an impression of it because there's no way I'd ever be able to do it justice. You'll just have to look it up yourself. Um,
Yeah, I am trying to find it.
it's bright and colorful, and it seems like a nice companion.
That's called a boga.
Bolga. So I really like the introduction of that animal. It's something we haven't seen before, and I just think it's fun.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a pretty cool dude. Interesting noise, like you said, that he makes. But he's fun. Let's see. What's another really cool thing about this movie? The way it was filmed was honestly very, very interesting and ambitious. Most of this film was basically filmed in a warehouse full of green screens, and blue. They use a lot of blue screen too. So like almost none of this was actual practical effects or setting, which is interesting because we talk about James Cameron being praised so much for his CGI and digital film, and we really don't really talk about George in the mix of all that. But honestly, I think this was probably one of the films where it was nearly, I'd probably say 90 to 95% of this was computer generated. I feel like you can tell that it's computer generated, but at the same time, it doesn't like look terrible, if that makes sense. It looks real, plausible, but it doesn't look cheap. It doesn't look like Sharktopus as Sarah and I have seen on TV and stuff. It's not like a cheap sci-fi movie. It actually looks like really good quality, especially for its time. George Lucas has been, a pioneer of building this technology throughout his career. Without him, we wouldn't have Pixar. Think about that. But yeah, really, really cool and ambitious. It's interesting to see how they filmed it, like with the behind the scenes and seeing like all the different rooms and hallways that they basically made up of, if you ever had those little mats that you use in gym class for gymnastics and stuff, it's basically a bunch of walls of those around, and then they film their scenes and then they color in everything around them. So I couldn't do that. I thought it was cool, super neat.
I'm gonna do a twofer here, being
Twofer.
one-liners and sidekicks. All right. The amount of one-liners we had in this, I think, was pretty cool, or at least the most famous one being the "Hello there, General Kenobi." That is so classic. Even if you haven't seen the film, you probably know that line.
Not a happy landing. That's one of my favorites.
That's a good one.
Oh, another one is right before that. It's when the ship like breaks in half and Anakin goes, "We lost something." I enjoy the chemistry between the two of them. And it really shines because Hayden and Ewan were actually like really good friends when filming.
They had a good chemistry mix going on there. And in terms of sidekicks, right? So I kind of already talked about what was it again? The Bolga?
Yep, Bolga.
So not that that's necessarily a sidekick, but more like a side character. The other two being 3PO and R2. I love those characters. I feel like they were used well in this film. There's 3PO is kind of more of a side one than R2 is. I feel like R2's a bit more involved, especially in the beginning of the film. He when they have the episode, the part of the movie where they're in the elevator shaft and they're trying to tell R2 to, turn the elevator to go in a certain direction or whatever, and he's trying to hide the audio chip because he doesn't want the other droids around to hear, and then he, gets caught and he squirts oil all over them, and then he catches them on fire, and he just kind of, floats away out of the fire, so out of danger. And he's being in control of the elevator and stuff. I don't know. They're just a fun duo, even when they're not together. I feel like their chemistry with Obi-Wan is pretty good too. At least with R2, because that's, the two that we're talking about when he was in the elevator shaft. Um, it's like a little bit of comedic relief, but at the same time, it's still pretty cool. Here's this droid outsmarting other droids.
Not to mention the like super oblivious comment that C-3PO says to Padme. Padme is like looking out the window and sees the Jedi Temple on fire, and he goes, like, it's been reported that Master Annie has returned to the temple. I'm sure everything will be all right. And she's just sitting there in tears because she can see the temple's on fire. Small things like that are kind of funny.
Yeah. I said they were gonna wipe 3PO's memory, and he goes, "Oh dear," or whatever he says. Like clearly he doesn't want that to happen. Like you just said to take good care of me, and now you want my memory wiped. What are you doing?
Yeah. I think my next one is probably going to be kind of controversial to listeners, and it's because there is quite an opinion about how Hayden Christensen plays the dark side. But I'm going to say it's a positive that George really implemented Vader's mannerisms and the way he talks into Hayden's character, even when he doesn't have the suit. Because, when we see Vader in the suit, we know how he acts, we know how he walks, how he talks. And I feel like when that translates to Anakin/Vader not being in the suit, people tend to forget how Vader actually is. And the problem here is that a lot of people were faulting Hayden with bad acting and not being good at being an evil character. But if you were to take, Hayden's mannerisms and put them side by side with Vader's, you would actually see he's doing exactly what Vader does, like the way he talks. Like, he kind of has like an interesting cadence to his voice. It's not, just an average person. There's something going on there that is definitely different. And the way he talks to people, like when we were rewatching, because we like to rewatch the films before we actually film stuff like this, is that when Anakin was talking to Padme, when he had arrived after being in the temple, and he's trying to explain to her what's happening, the way he's trying to almost be convincing to her is the exact same way that Vader talks to Luke in Return of the Jedi. Like, he doesn't face the person that he's trying to talk to. He's looking away from them, like full on, like they're behind him, and he's explaining what his thoughts are, and then he eventually turns to, face who he's talking to, and try to bring it full circle. Like, I spilled out my guts. What's your response? And now he wants to see how they're going to respond to how they're talking. So just little things like that. If you don't believe me, watch the clips. Watch how he talks to Padme in that scene. And then the scene that I'm talking about specifically with Luke is when Luke basically turns himself in, and him and Vader are talking on the little bridge before they get into the walker on Endor. Just cool little things like that. It's attention to detail where if you don't put the two together, I can see where the disconnect is, but if you can put them together, it's beautiful. It's Star Wars. So you have to understand all of it. I will quote one of my favorite video games that isn't Star Wars, Kingdom Hearts. Those who know nothing understand nothing. So if you don't understand if you don't know what's happening, you're not going to understand it. So little cool things like that. Did you have any other cool things you wanted to bring up?
Not particularly.
One of the things, I guess, to just kind of wrap it up, one, I liked the introduction of Grievous. He was a really cool character to bring into this. I would have loved to have seen more of him. You can see a lot more of him in the Clone Wars show, but he doesn't have very much more of a live action appearance. You can see him in the original Clone Wars, which actually had like a prequel set up, prequel to the prequel, quote unquote, of like how the Emperor or Chancellor at this point was kidnapped by Grievous and then taken up to a ship. Or you can watch the Clone Wars, which is probably what people now think of as the Clone Wars. I don't remember if they really address the kidnapping of the Chancellor in that one. There's a bit more of a different focus from what I remember, especially with having Ahsoka in the mix of things. So you can see Grievous there. The other thing is...
Before you move on,
Oh.
I just want to say Grievous was pretty cool, and his like spider-like crawling movements was pretty cool. Just the hearing the ting ting tings of, you know, his metal body crawling across the floor, but it's obviously he's giant. And then also seeing his demise and the way that Obi-Wan like ripped open his chest and then was able to use a blaster pistol to like pretty much catch him on fire somehow. I thought that was a pretty cool sequence.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like you have to see his heartbeat and stuff. It was kind of gross at the same time, but like
And
probably
the fire going up his organs to his eyes.
yeah, I know. Fire going everywhere. I liked his vehicle too, the little circular like I wouldn't call it a unicycle, but it is one wheel. It was kind of like a motorcycle, but he sits in the wheel. I think that one was really cool too. The other thing that I think is pretty cool, again, you kind of have to go outside of the film to understand what's going on here. But if you read the book of Revenge of the Sith, the book goes into a bit of detail of Count Dooku's character, of how he legitimately believed that he was going to be the one to follow the Emperor and, you know, be the second in command for the length of the Empire. He knew what was going to happen. And I feel like if the general audience knew more about that, I think that his reaction when Palpatine tells Anakin to just flat out kill him on Grievous's flagship, that it would have added a little more tension to it, because we see Dooku's, you know, face in distraught, like, what are you talking about? Why are you telling him to kill me? Because his belief was that he was going to be the one. But as we see in like I don't know, 20 minutes later, when Grievous is asking the Emperor about, like, we lost Dooku, what are we going to do? And he's the Emperor says, you know, we need somebody far younger and more powerful. And, you know, that happens to be the person that killed Dooku, being Anakin. So it puts things in motion, but it's kind of cool to understand that, you know, Dooku is more than just, he's kind of like a stand-in almost for this movie, where it, you know, Anakin, last time he saw Dooku on the live action screen, Anakin was technically defeated, but within 20 to 30 minutes of this film, he gets his rematch, and then we get to see him technically murder Count Dooku. So Dooku really didn't get substance in this film, whereas if you were been able to read the book beforehand, or even just a little excerpt, which is probably not too far into the book, it would have added so much more to it. But I think we'll wrap up our positivity section here, and we will come back with our final thoughts on the film. And so stick around. Have you ever wondered what it's like to grow up during the prequel era? Do you wonder what type of merchandise was around then? How different was it than it is now? Check out our videos on this channel where we talk about the merchandise of The Phantom Menace and the merchandise of Attack of the Clones. They are here on this channel. The Phantom Menace is my first video ever on YouTube, so there's a special place in my heart for that one, so please, if any, check that out. Now back to our show. All right, we're back with our final segment, just kind of wrapping up our thoughts on all the things of Revenge of the Sith. In between breaks, Sarah reminded me that she actually had one dislike that she thought of in the process of talking about all this stuff. So, what is the one dislike that you forgot to mention in the dislike or tough love portion?
One thing that I forgot to mention earlier was when it's time to finally take Emperor Palpatine into, um, take him into custody, if you will. And, Mace Windu's telling Anakin, no, you can't go because it's too dangerous for you to be there. So basically, instead, in his mind, he's taking these, three other Jedi with him. So you got four master Jedis, right? Like they're all master level.
They are. I would say Mace is definitely above all the other three, but the other three I would probably call like a mid-tier Jedi Master.
Okay, but master nonetheless. The way that Palpatine just shreds through them and they don't even try to defend themselves, except maybe one of them. Like he kills two right off the bat. No contest. Didn't even put up a fight. Just hack and slash. You're gone. You're dead. It seemed pretty pathetic for Jedi Masters to not even put up a little bit of a fight. I think it would have been way more cool to see some sort of a lightsaber battle between the four of them, because for him to just go out right off and kill two of them and then to, like have maybe one little back and forth with the third person before dealing with Mace, it seems pretty unbelievable that the Jedi would be that weak. Or I know when we were watching it, you told me it was just that maybe he was that quick. I have a hard time believing that they wouldn't anticipate him not completely surrendering. And if you don't think somebody's going to completely surrender, that means they're probably going to put up a fight. So wouldn't you prepare yourself for that? Like it takes a little bit of common sense, not even using the force to understand that this guy's not going to come willingly. So I don't know. It seemed odd.
I would say yes and no. I think they were prepared because they ignited their lightsabers right away when they entered the office. But I would agree that at least from just a general viewer point of view, that it kind of sucked to just see them, killed immediately. I feel like it would have been maybe a bit more cool, like you said, where the four of them, or yeah, there was four Jedi, I think. The four of them were going up against him. Like maybe Palpatine went to block somebody and like pushed it into another one to kill him or something to take him off guard. That would have been kind of cool. But I would agree. Like when I first saw this, and even to this day, I think it's kind of cheap. They just got rid of like two of them right away, and then the third one not too long after.
It almost seems like, why didn't they just have two of them to start with?
It should have been Mace and Anakin. That's all it had to be. And you done did it, Mace Windu. You done did it.
And the movie would have been over right then and there. No, I'm just kidding.
It would have definitely been different. Yeah, I would agree in that sense that that scene in particular probably could have been handled a little bit differently. I do remember as a kid thinking about, the Emperor is supposed to be this super powerful dude, but at the same time, I guess he is, kind of older, so he wouldn't have like the quickness like Anakin, but I would have expected a little bit more from what was happening there. I do think Ian McDiarmid was doing most of his fighting in that scene. I don't think they use a double very much for him, but yeah, I would say that scene probably could have been a bit better.
So here's a question for you then, related to Emperor Palpatine, but not necessarily this battle or struggle. Is this the first episode we see Force lightning in?
No.
Well, no, I take that back. What?
Episode 2, Dooku went and then threw Anakin across the room.
Oh, I forgot about that. I was thinking back to, we see him use it in, don't hate me for this, but one of the original trilogy movies. I don't remember which one.
The sixth one.
Okay. So we've seen Force lightning then. I just didn't remember which one. So it wouldn't have been the first time we've seen Force lightning. But it's probably one of the times we've seen the most Force lightning, don't you think? Or at least, the big effect, because it aged him like 30, 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, they did it in, like I said, episode 2. They did it here in episode 3. Episode 6. Snoke used it in 8, and then the Emperor used it again in 9. Which is a big criticism by people, but we'll get there when we finally get to that movie in this podcast series. It's been used a handful of times in live action. It's been used also in animation. But yeah, it's been used a handful of times.
I think it was neat. And for us to be able to see the aging on Palpatine, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, kind of his transformation into finally what we expect him to look like.
Right? A skeleton with skin.
Yeah.
Since
There's
his eyes
different-
are so sunken.
Yeah, there's, I believe, different colors too. I think there's a red lightning.
Ooh.
Lightning. I don't know if it's in film. I've definitely seen it before.
That'd be pretty cool.
Don't remember where I saw it. Let's see. What else is there to talk about for Revenge of the Sith?
How do you feel about Padme's character? Good, bad, and the ugly. I feel like she did okay. But at the same time, like her character arc was good, and that she tried to go and save Anakin or tried to rescue him or whatever in her eyes she was trying to do. But for the bulk of the film, I feel like her character was a little blah because she was kind of just staying home, waiting for Anakin to show up, talking to him for a minute, and then he'd leave. And that was it. Over and over and over.
Yeah, I think we have to remember who this movie is about, and that's probably why she was sidelined a bit more. Simply because it's about Anakin's turn, and that's pretty much it. I will say, so I think I said it in a previous podcast that like Natalie Portman was one of my like celebrity crushes growing up, and there's one scene in that movie where when I was like, "Ooh, what's going on here?" And that was the first time I think the first time we see her, and she's like talking to Anakin on the balcony. I feel like she doesn't look anything like the other shots in this film in that one particular scene. Like it almost looked like the makeup artist or whoever didn't show up that day and they had to like put her together. It looked drastic. Her appearance was drastically different from all the other scenes. But I thought I still don't I don't really like that she died from a broken heart, but I feel like in a way it's an interesting plot point where in episode 2, Anakin vowed to never fail again when he has these visions of someone he loves dying. And then in episode 3, he has the visions and he's trying to do everything he possibly can to stop it. And it turns out it happened because he did it. So it's an interesting play on that. And so I thought that was pretty cool. It almost seemed like if he hadn't done anything, he would have been fine. It would have been all good.
He should have just run away to Naboo with her.
Yeah. He should have just, left the Jedi Order, not worried about anything, had his kids, and it would have been the end of it.
Would have been a totally different story arc.
Yeah. But then it wouldn't connect to the original trilogy, so
no.
That wouldn't make any sense. All right, so I think that probably does a pretty good job of wrapping it up. I guess one last thing I will mention is that alongside Episode 3's video game, Lego Star Wars also did a video game where this movie was a part of, and it came out right around the time that this movie came out. It was close enough where if you bought the Lego Star Wars video game, you got a movie ticket to see Episode 3. So it was, that close. It was also, I think it was released before the movie came out. So it still had that same effect as the Revenge of the Sith video game, where you kind of got to see the movie before the movie in a way. but it's a lot harder to pick apart what was happening in the film in Lego Star Wars because there's no talking. It's just, seeing people move around and stuff. But where I'm going with this is that they actually had stuff in that video game too that was part of the quote unquote director's cut. The scene where Obi-Wan and Yoda are approaching the Jedi Temple. And in the movie, we just see them fighting the clones and killing them. Whereas in Lego Star Wars, it shows that what first happened was when Yoda and Obi-Wan were walking up to the temple, the clone troopers were not facing away from the temple. They were facing towards the temple, and they were wearing Jedi robes. So they were trying to fake that they were Jedi. So then if a Jedi were to come up and be like, what's going on? They would turn around and basically kill them. But again, that's in the video game. It's not in the movies. I'm pretty sure it's in the book.
It's a
But it
pretty
would-
savage move.
It would have been interesting to see. I believe it's a deleted scene. I think that's a thing. So check it out if you haven't seen it already. It was a good idea, but again, gotta chop things up and leave them on the cutting room floor. Dang it all. Why can't we just have director's cuts for everything? All right, so we talked about Revenge of the Sith this week for Shoot the Sheev. We talked about what was happening during the time, our tough love, our positives, and some extra things along the way. So if you enjoy these types of podcasts, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We try to drop one every Wednesday here, so please look forward to our next one. We like to have extra guests as well, so from time to time we have more people on here too. Drop us a like if you liked the video, and drop us a comment letting us know your thoughts on Revenge of the Sith. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.